All right, welcome everyone to another deep dive. Today we're going exploring the ideas of, well, someone I find to be a very fascinating thinker, Carl Jung.
Ah, Carl Jung, yes.
So he was a Swiss psychiatrist and,
A pioneer in the field of, exploring the unconscious.
right, in the early 20th century,
Mhm.
early 1900s. And he was really one of the first to kind of go down this path of really trying to understand the unconscious mind.
And all the mysteries that it holds,
Yeah.
for sure.
And he did work with Freud, so can you
Yes.
imagine those
Oh,
conversations?
to be a fly on the wall
Oh,
for
we're
those.
like, come on.
Yeah, amazing.
But they eventually kind of parted ways, but he went on to establish his own school of thought
Right?
called analytical psychology, and it's had a huge impact all over the world.
Global reach.
Yeah. But it's interesting because in some places, like even in Brazil, he's not as prominent in like academic circles.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting in
Yeah.
university settings and things like that.
Yeah. But you are much more likely to find him in like the self-help section of a bookstore. So
Right.
that's kind of interesting too. You kind of see how his ideas have kind of permeated, or at least some version of his ideas.
In popular culture, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Now, there's a lot of uh misconceptions about Jung, and we should address some of those before we go any further.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's important.
So, people will say that he's a mystic or that his ideas are confusing, or even sometimes that he was a Nazi sympathizer or a bigamist. All these kinds of crazy accusations.
It's fascinating how these rumors kind of start and spread, isn't it?
I know, right?
But it's important, I think, to address these with, a critical eye, and also to remember that Jung himself, he was very aware of the role of the personal equation, in the development of theories. He famously said every psychology, every theory is a kind of a product of the person who developed it.
Oh, that's interesting.
So he was very aware of his own limitations.
Oh, that's a really good point.
You know, and he actually said that about Freud and Adler too. He said,
Oh, really?
yeah, their descriptions of the psyche, are really applicable to a lot of people. But he felt that, there were some people, himself included, who had a different,
Hmm. Oh,
a different but similar psychology. And so his intention was uh, to offer his work as a kind of subjective confession,
oh, okay.
acknowledging that he also had his own biases, his own lens, and that, hopefully Freud and Adler could also, contribute to this greater understanding by acknowledging their own subjective viewpoints as well.
Okay. So he kind of saw himself as just offering his own
It's a
perspective.
piece of the puzzle, yeah.
Yeah. But it also sounds like his work was kind of driven by this larger aim,
Yeah.
almost like he was trying to rescue something.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it.
What do you think he was trying to rescue?
Cool. I think he was trying to reclaim the world of symbols, the human symbolic world that he felt had become the domain of religions, and Eastern, mystics and philosophies and all these things. And so his effort was really to try to um, translate that knowledge into Western language.
So to kind of bring it into like the Western world, that kind of understanding.
Exactly. Yeah. To try to make it relatable and comprehensible to you and I,
Yep.
as Western thinkers.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's interesting because, later in his life, he even went on to explore physics, trying to find connections
Really?
with the unconscious, the phenomena of the unconscious,
Wow.
which really speaks to his deep desire to understand these things.
And that also kind of dovetails with that 20th century Western interest in the East and
Yeah.
like, the rise of yoga and meditation and, you know,
All these spiritual practices. Yeah,
yeah, and the resurgence of religion and mysticism in general.
absolutely.
I mean, Paulo Coelho.
Very popular author. Yeah.
Yeah.
Explores these themes a lot.
So it's like, was the West just kind of at a point where we needed that return to, inner life, that's been so emphasized in the East?
I think Jung would say yes.
Yeah.
He was very much a proponent of that idea that that we had reached a point in Western culture where this was crucial for our psychological well-being.
Right. And speaking of religion, he had a very specific definition of religion.
Yes.
It wasn't just about believing in a certain,
Right.
creed or something like that.
Okay.
He said it was the careful consideration and observation of certain dynamic factors conceived as powers, spirits, demons, gods, laws, ideas, ideals, or any other definition given by man to such factors. And he warned that ignoring these powers, these things, could lead to, all sorts of psychic pathologies and even like social convulsions.
Wow. Yeah, he felt very strongly about the importance of these, internal, often invisible dynamics.
Right. But it's important to understand that, and this is where a lot of people get confused, he wasn't saying like, go out and join a religion,
Right, exactly.
He wasn't advocating for any specific religion or mystical activity.
No, not the
He
case.
was really addressing people whose unconscious was no longer contained by traditional churches or
Yeah.
traditions,
Yeah, it's like the old wineskins couldn't hold the new wine anymore.
Yeah,
You know?
right. And he really saw himself as a scientist, right?
Absolutely. An empirical scientist.
Yeah,
He built his ideas based on the observation of realities.
right.
And he really considered religious phenomena to be a type of psychic reality.
Yeah.
And he was primarily interested in the individual's experience of those phenomena,
Ah,
including religious ones.
okay. So it's all about your own personal experience.
Right.
And he didn't see his work as, some brand new thing.
Yeah.
He saw it as part of a much longer, you know,
A continuation. Yeah.
continuation, yeah, of trying to understand the unconscious.
Right.
Right. And it's interesting because you often hear Gnosticism or alchemy kind of thrown around with Jung,
Yeah. And I think part of that is because Jung himself referred to these things in his writings
Okay.
a lot,
Yeah.
and he did so as a student of those traditions,
Okay.
recognizing the symbolic parallels,
Huh.
to what he was seeing in the human psyche.
So he was more using them as kind of like
Source
these
material.
historical examples. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I think another reason why people associate him with those things is because his writing style can be a little
Oh, yeah. That's what I was going to say.
nonlinear.
Nonlinear. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're looking for a very systematic step-by-step,
Yes. Yeah.
kind of approach.
It can be a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
He himself described his thinking as a circular process. Always consider things again and from another angle,
Yeah.
a new type of peripatetic reflection.
Peripatetic reflection. I like that.
Yeah. So it's more like circling around an idea,
Okay.
rather than marching in a straight line.
Right.
And the fundamental aim of his work, I think, was to really bring value to the unconscious,
Okay.
without devaluing the importance of consciousness.
All right.
It was all about this dialogue,
And
this interplay between those two things.
so like a conversation between
Yes.
your conscious self and the, deeper, more hidden parts.
Exactly, yeah.
And I mean, the guy wrote 18 volumes of collected works and published seminars.
A monumental body of work.
It's a lot to cover,
It
But
is, yes.
our goal today isn't to try to summarize all of that.
Right,
It's
yeah.
really to kind of just give you a little bit of a taste to kind of
Yeah.
pique your interest.
Yeah, a starting point.
Yeah.
An entryway.
Yeah. So, to give you an idea of where we're going with this, we're going to start by looking at his beginnings, kind of his early life,
Okay.
how he became interested in the unconscious. Then we're going to dive into some of his core concepts like complexes, psychic energy, psychological types, Siebel's, archetypes.
Yeah, the building blocks of his theories.
Yeah, dreams, the shadow,
And then-
anima animus.
Oh, yeah, those are fascinating.
Right. Persona and the self.
All those good things.
And then we'll look at his engagement with history and other cultures,
Right.
including alchemy,
Which was a huge influence on him.
Christianity, and, his encounters with other cultures.
Yeah, fascinating stuff.
And then we'll touch on that kind of, controversial period around Nazism.
Yeah, we can't avoid that.
Yeah, and his connection to physics through synchronicity.
Oh, yeah, that's a mind bender.
Right. And then we'll delve into that really central concept of individuation.
The heart of his work, yeah.
So buckle up. We've got a lot to cover.
Let's do it.
Now, having explored Jung's early life, his core concepts, his forays into history, different cultures, even physics with synchronicity, we're now at the heart of it all, and that's individuation.
Individuation, yeah, it's really it's the cornerstone of Jungian psychology.
Yeah, it's this idea that the unconscious is this dynamic force
Yeah?
that's constantly trying to like express itself, to
Yeah.
integrate with your conscious awareness.
Yeah, it's almost like if we go back to that ship analogy, it's like the captain,
Right.
realizing that the deep currents of the ocean are also guiding the ship,
Yeah.
not just his conscious decisions at the helm.
Right. And the crew down below, they have their own like wisdom
Yeah,
about what's going on.
exactly.
And the captain can't just ignore that.
No,
Yeah.
they've got to listen to what's coming up from below.
Right. And so this journey of individuation requires you to kind of, bring your conscious will into alignment with, those deeper impulses.
Mm,
But it also means, paying attention to the realities of the external world.
yeah.
And it's not always it can lead you away from the rest of the fleet, the collective.
Yeah, it can lead to a divergence from the norms,
Yeah.
the expectation.
And even in opposition to the majority. So
Exactly.
this can create both internal and external conflict
Right.
because you're kind of going against the grain.
Rocking the boat a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Jung believed that the unconscious often presents itself as an other,
Hmm.
throughout your life,
Yeah.
something that's separate but connected to you.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And so individuation is about like recognizing and giving a voice to that other.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
But it also involves confronting some really tough ethical and moral questions,
Wow.
right? Because as you're kind of navigating this inner landscape, you might find yourself moving beyond like, just automatically accepting what society tells you
Yeah.
or culture,
Right.
or even, patriotic dictates,
Yeah, you start to develop your own ethical framework,
Right.
which may not align with the prevailing norms.
Yeah. So it's about discovering your own compass, your own true north,
Yeah.
rather than just blindly following,
The collective map.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that comes with a cost, right?
It does. Yeah.
There's a responsibility to
Right.
that kind of divergence.
Because something must be offered in return.
Okay.
You can't just take.
And so this is where, he emphasized the role of the individual in society.
Yeah, it's not just about becoming an individual in isolation.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that, that you have a role to play
Yeah.
in the larger collective,
Okay.
and that it's through this process of individuation that new values are created,
Ah, interesting.
and old ones are challenged,
Okay.
and that real social transformation relies on those individuals who are willing to bring, the hidden aspects of themselves and the hidden aspects of the collective
Okay.
into conscious awareness.
So it's not just about becoming like this,
This self-absorbed individual, yeah.
right.
Yeah. Individuation is very different from individualism.
Yeah.
It's about realizing your unique nature and potential, but also realizing that what happens to another human being resonates within you as well.
Wow.
It's about becoming more fully yourself
Yeah.
and more deeply connected to all of humanity.
Really interesting. A really thought-provoking idea to end on.
It is, isn't it? And it leads us to this final thought for you, the listener.
Okay.
Consider Jung's idea that your individual process of individuation, with its ethical and moral challenges and its potential to, lead you away from those norms,
Mm-hmm.
is actually essential for the creation of new values
Mm-hmm.
and the transformation of society.
Okay.
So that, as you go about your day, just think about whether you see examples of this in the world around you,
Yeah.
and maybe even in your own life,
Yeah.
your own journey.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us for another deep dive,
It's been a pleasure.
and we'll see you next time.
See you then.